looking at all that has happened through COVID and the challenges that were faced by the world globally, but by women in particular. And as we, as a global community, re-looking at how we will rebuild our economies, ensuring that this time around, for the lessons that we have learned from COVID, we do not have any planning that excludes women in our plans. The COVID-19 pandemic has taught us that if we continue doing planning as we did, without putting a feminist lens or a gender lens, all the resources that were put in place in terms of recovery and assisting businesses did not go into women businesses, especially women who have small businesses, because they were not meeting the requirements that were set for recovery. So we are looking forward to a dialogue that will start this partnership for the two countries and ensuring that in future, we will harness whatever is in both countries. We will ensure that the partnership transcends the roundtable and goes to real businesses. We will ensure that the roundtable takes out, can you please mute who is speaking now? We will ensure that the roundtable moves from a virtual to physical, where opportunities that have been brought by Her Excellency Ambassador Lobe. Can you please mute, Kay, mute whoever is speaking, please?
I think you can drop.
Thank you very much. That we will ensure that the opportunities that have been brought by Ambassador Lobe and her counterpart in Singapore really becomes real for women-owned businesses in both our countries. We want to continue, maybe before I continue, to thank also Auleen South Africa for championing together with our president, Ambassador Lobe, this roundtable, to thank our partners, Black Women's Caucus, PABWA, the Embassy Direct, Department of International Relations and Cooperation, Digitally Legal, Sun Media, and Generation Equality. I'm putting Generation Equality because all what we are doing now, we are making sure that by 2030, we have a just and equal society. And we cannot have a just and equal society if women in their majority still don't have economic power. If women are still depending on grants and are not, they are not empowering others, they are not wealth creators, they are not mentioned when we talk about millionaires and billionaires. So when we speak about generation equality, by 2030, we need to ensure that we deal with issues of hunger, there is no poverty, and women occupy those positions that have been, in a way, closed, even when the door was open for them. So the roundtable will also address those issues. We need to learn from each other. Those who have already made it, how did you make it? What are the strategies that we can learn from you to ensure that we do not repeat the mistakes that were repeated before? So with those words, I want first to indicate that at the moment, Her Excellency, Madame Lobe, is just in a meeting that she would not be able to come out, but she will join us as soon as she has done the meeting. So if DM is able to join us, I would want then, DM, are you available? I would want to introduce.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I would want to introduce our keynote speaker, Deputy Minister in the Presidency, Mepinki Kekano, who is also the coordinator for the Pillar for Political Participation from Africa for African Women Leadership Network in South Africa. Deputy Minister, please talk to us.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Let me stand on existing protocols, taking this opportunity on the acknowledgements that you have done to all our participants and panelists who are part of this roundtable discussion. But it is also important for me to recognize Her Excellency, Mayor Charlotte Luby, the South African High Commissioner to Singapore, and also recognize His Excellency, Z.A. Mantaha, the Singapore High Commissioner to South Africa. Program Director, let me also recognize all the speakers and panelists that will be part of this and members of the media. Of course, we have ladies and gentlemen from the South African side, but also others from Singapore and across the world. We want to really welcome you on this platform. Program Director, I want to start out by congratulating the High Commissioner, Mayor Charlotte Luby, on her creation of this platform that will quite evidently create pathways between our two nations. The fact that Luby have done this in her first 100 days in office speaks volumes of your commitment to the diplomatic agenda between South Africa and Singapore is well and truly optimized. Much respect and gratitude, High Commissioner. I know you said she'll be joining us very soon, and I think we'll also still share these words of gratifying her. In 1956, thousands of women of all races, classes, and cultures gathered to march against the injustice of past laws when they were legally not allowed to gather together under the apartheid laws of its time, to boldly go where no woman of the African continent had gone before, to take on a legal segregation regime. It did not have the desired outcome of abolishment. However, it created a very definitive crack in the very enduring apartheid system we were fighting against. And this crack would have continuous pressure applied to it over the next few decades until it broke completely, giving rise to the freedom and democracy that we know today in South Africa. The 9th of August, the day of the march in 1956, is honored with a national public holiday in our country because of the significance of this crack and what it meant to the struggle for freedom holistically. Women are the bedrock of society, of humanity. Fact. Whether in South Africa or Singapore or anywhere in the world, this statement will not differ. The challenges we face today as women are the same in some ways, but also very different in others. The one thing that the 1956 march taught us is that even if a challenge is presented, women have a resourcefulness and resilience that cannot sometimes be articulated. But as women here today, you know and understand exactly what I mean. Therein lies the power of the sisterhood and the opportunities that may have eluded us for generations, but no more. Clearly, but by the very nature of this event, we are creating cracks in the system and finding our way to each other across time zones, currencies, geographies, languages, and cultures. Today, we gather to create streams in a desert. To quote Her Excellency, as she simply means that we have to start, even if it's a trickle, we have to think about what the opportunities will be. To grow those streams to rivers and lakes if we choose to. Singapore is an important trade and investment partner to South Africa. The total value of bilateral trade between the two countries in 2021 was 13 billion rand, with exports at 7.9 billion and imports at 5.1 billion rand. There is meaningful potential to increase South African exports in the agricultural, in the food processing and food production sectors. Africa, after all, has enough land to feed the whole world. And South Africa, as the continent's most industrialized nation, has the capacity to deliver on that in respect of globally benchmarked manufacturing, packaging, quality and safety standard compliance, and even branding, promotions and advertising are all South African strengths. Actually, it's what completely sets us apart. Doing business with South Africa opens up many opportunities at various levels and is also a potential gateway to the African continent for even further development of diplomatic relations across the whole continent of 55 member states in total. Singapore's impressive recovery from the pandemic is outperforming similar economies with total output exceeding pre-crisis levels last year, according to the IMF report released a few days ago. But that rebound has apparently also been uneven with the challenges that still exist, like it is for all countries across the world, especially so because of the global impact of the Russian war on the One of the major risks facing all countries at this time, and South Africa and Singapore are no exception, is the evolving risks and developments as they are occurring in our rapidly changing world. So a need to focus on exploring possibilities and innovative approach within the context of current agreements, because sometimes it's not about new, it's just about a different perspective. This is where the game change is going to come from. So our Minister Naledi Pandor's visit to Singapore in early July at the invitation of Singapore's Minister of Foreign Affairs to discuss bilateral and multilateral cooperation issues of mutual interest created a timely foundation for opportunities to be explored and expanded on. I see this session today as one of the first actions in terms of that exploration, a game changer within the context of existing frameworks, nothing new, just a different perspective. So, as we navigate this next few months in a very uncertain and economically fragmented world, It is hoped that the engagements from today's session and the ongoing relations that Her Excellency Melobi is very clearly committed to will set in motion an era of possibility and potential as the definition of relations between our two nations. So we want to take this opportunity as South Africa and active participants in this forum to say we are committed to this bilateral. As women celebrating this Women's Month, in the words of Mem Mabato, our program director, we can turn the tide for our women and create opportunities through this bilateral. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister, for your keynote address. And just to take one thing that came from your address, exploration, that this roundtable must assist us to explore opportunities. And I like what you have just said, that we do have a bilateral already in place. So let's work with existing frameworks, because we do now have existing frameworks, but more often than not, you find that we do not use them to the best of our abilities. Let's explore together. Let's see what we can do to change the lives of women in both countries. It was very interesting to hear from you that IMF says Singapore came out even stronger. So those are the lessons that we need to learn from them. How did they make it when a lot of economies are struggling, even now, to get out of the pandemic woes that really befell the whole world? With that, I'm now going to call Her Excellency Mr. Zedman Taha, Singapore High Commissioner to South Africa, to also, His Excellency, to also give us a keynote address. His Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Can I just do a sound check? Can everybody hear me?
We can hear you clearly, Excellency.
Thank you very much for your remarks, Program Director. And Deputy Minister in the Presidency, the Honorable Pinky Kekana, Her Excellency, of course, my sister, my colleague in Singapore, Mashalid Lobe, the High Commissioner of South Africa in Singapore, distinguished participants, panelists, speakers, as well as attendees. I remember, Deputy Minister, I'm not sure what they remember, that we had lunch at the residence in Pretoria, myself and of course High Commissioner Lobe, just before her departure for Singapore. And we had discussed about the sort of things that one needs to do to build on the already good relations between Singapore and South Africa. And you actually correct, DM, that we do have already a very strong foundation. We have a very clear framework about how we're going to engage one another. In fact, South Africa and Singapore will be celebrating its 30th anniversary of diplomatic relations next year in 2023. So this roundtable will be paving the way for what we're going to do and discuss, and of course, engage one another in 2023. So I'm really looking forward to it. And I would like to join you, Program Director, as well as DM, in congratulating my sister, High Commissioner Lobe in Singapore, as well as the colleagues at the South African High Commission, and all the partners that are represented this morning in Pretoria and this afternoon in Singapore. Thank you so much for the initiative of organizing the inaugural South Africa-Singapore Women's Roundtable on the occasion of the 2022 Women's Month in South Africa. And Deputy Minister Kekana, thank you for taking time off your busy schedule at the Presidency, as well as the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation, to join us this morning and for delivering what I think is a very strategic and very inspiring keynote address. Thank you for setting out the context, the broader context about why we're meeting this morning. And I really look forward, of course, to the discussion that would follow. May I also, through you, Deputy Minister, offer my heartiest congratulations to South Africa, my host country, for its successful observance of Women's Month this year under the theme Women's Socio-Economic Rights and Empowerment, Building Back Better for Women's Resilience. Indeed, Program Director, as you very well know, all through the month of August, what must be hundreds of events to commemorate Women's Month have been organized, and not only in South Africa, but also in many other countries where South Africa has diplomatic representations. With today's roundtable, we are joining all those efforts to keep alive the spirit of the 20,000 women who marched to the Union buildings in Pretoria 66 years ago on the 9th of August to demand freedom and women's rights in South Africa. And 9 years after that fateful 9th of August 1956 march, the world witnessed another milestone halfway across the Indian Ocean, halfway across the world and across the other side of the Indian Ocean, the birth of Independent Republic of Singapore on 9th of August 1965. Now, I made a friend recently, Ms. Bonnie Lee, a businesswoman from Singapore, who currently resides in Harare, Zimbabwe, but spends a considerable amount of time in South Africa. When she saw my social media post on today's roundtable, she contacted me to remind me that the women's rights movement in contemporary Singapore also began in the 1950s, with the formation of the Singapore Council of Women in 1952. The Singapore Council of Women is the precursor to the Singapore Council of Women organizations, which I believe is represented in today's represented. In fact, it was Bonnie's own grandmother, the pioneer of women's rights in Singapore, Madam Tan Cheng Hiong, who had co-founded the Singapore Council of Women and became its first president. The active advocacy of the Singapore Council of Women in the early years eventually led to the banning of polygamy in Singapore and the adoption of the Women's Charter in 1961. Now, the Charter is a seminal piece of legislation as it protects the rights of women by providing for monogamous marriages, regulating the rights and duties of married persons, protecting the family, and penalizing offenses against women and girls. Bonnie had very much wanted to be part of this roundtable, but unfortunately, she is traveling on business as we speak. Priorities, Madam Program Director. Since the Women's Charter came into force in 1961, predating even Singapore's full independence in 1965, Singapore women have made rapid and significant progress in carving out an undeniable role for themselves, equal to men in all spheres of life and at all levels. Let me just give you some data points to establish this. In the 2020 UN Human Development Report, Singapore was ranked 12th out of 162 countries and second in Asia on the Gender Inequality Index under the Gender Development Index. Singapore has also consistently been placed in Group 1, which groups countries with high equality in Human Development Index achievements between women and men. Second data point, in 2021, the literacy rate for women resident in Singapore aged 15 years and above was 96.4%. Women also made up almost 50% of Singapore residents aged 25 years and over with university qualification. And the employment rate of Singapore women aged between 25 and 64 was 75.1%. A third data point, also in 2021, the percentage of women on the boards of Singapore's top 100 listed companies has increased to almost 20%, and on the boards of public institutions, almost 30%. In fact, according to a Deloitte report in 2021, 13.1% of companies in Singapore have female CEOs, chief executive officers. Now this, Madam Program Director, is the highest proportion globally. And politically, in the 14th Parliament of Singapore, whose 5-year term commenced in August 2020, women occupied 31 out of 104 seats, almost 30% of Parliament. This is higher than the Inter-Parliamentary Union's average of 25.5%, and in line with UN's target of 30% women lawmakers in each Parliament. Of course, earlier in September 2017, Madam Halimah Yaacob, formerly the first woman Speaker of Parliament, was elected the first woman president of Singapore, the highest office of the land. Now, over the years, Madam Program Director, two attributes have served as the foundation for the cause of women and equality in Singapore. First is the principle of equality, as enshrined in Article 12(1) of the Singapore Constitution, which states all persons are equal before law and entitled to equal protection of the law. The second attribute is the policy of meritocracy, which reflects our long-standing commitment to building a society where all Singaporeans can grow to their fullest potential. It has been a great equalizer for women in Singapore, opening doors to equal opportunities. Now, on the 60th anniversary of the Women's Charter, Singapore dedicated 2021 the year of celebrating SG Women, or Singapore Women. Now, during the year, we came together as a nation to take stock of the progress of our women, our society, and how we can continue to support these aspirations. In September last year, a year-long nationwide conversations on Singapore women's development were completed. The aspirations for women in Singapore expressed during these conversations have been consolidated into the White Paper on Singapore Women's Development. In April 2022, the same White Paper was unanimously endorsed by Parliament. What the White Paper is, Madam Program Director, is that it represents a shared vision for a fairer and more inclusive society where men and women partner each other as equals and both can pursue their aspirations freely and to their fullest. Specifically, 25 action plans in 5 areas have been formulated for implementation by both the government and the community stakeholders at large. The 5 areas are as follows, Madam Program Director. The first area is the promotion of equal opportunities in the workplace. Now, the employment rate amongst women in Singapore is already quite high at 75%. But to further provide women equal opportunities in the workplace, Singapore will strengthen workplace fairness through legislation and entrench flexible work arrangements as a workplace norm in partnership with employers and community organizations. The second area, Madam Program Director, is giving due recognition to and support caregivers. Many of our panelists would know that the care economy is one of the fastest expanding economic sectors globally, including in Singapore. A World Economic Forum, in fact, reports that by 2022, this year, Madam Program Director, almost 40% of job openings in emerging professions will be in the care economy. The majority of care professionals are women. Now, given our aging population, the demands for care are evolving rapidly in Singapore. Care professionals are required to uphold the highest standards of conduct and professionalism. They must be able to provide care and support regardless of backgrounds and needs. And critical core skills such as communication, digital fluency, and learning agility are also essential to help care professionals stay relevant as organizations innovate their service models through technology and partnerships. Singapore will therefore provide caregivers the support they need through programs like Skills Future, which is our national movement for lifelong learning, to upskill and seize growing opportunities in the care economy. The third area, Madam Program Director, is the protection against violence and harm. Singapore may already be one of the safest countries in the world, having been ranked first in Gallup's Global Law and Order report since 2017. Now, we have taken already decisive measures to combat violence and harm against women through legislation, enforcement, and policies. To enhance the protection against violence and harm to women, we have revised sentencing framework for sexual offenses and enhanced the protection of survivors of family violence. Now, most recently, Madam Program Director, measures to protect victims of sexual and hurt offenses have evolved to meet the changing context and nature of harms, such as emerging trends in the online sphere. We have therefore taken steps to raise the awareness of and accessibility to resources for victims of online harms. In June 2022, the Ministry of Communications and Information in Singapore announced its proposal to draw new codes of practice that would require designated social media services to have appropriate measures and safeguards to mitigate exposure to harmful online content for Singapore-based users. Now, these include, of course, having community standards, content moderation processes and tools, and options to manage users' exposure to harmful content and interactions. The fourth area, Madam Program Director, is the provision of other forms of support for women. Now, as more and more job opportunities are created for women, they need support to better balance work and family responsibilities to achieve their aspirations. Such care and support are particularly critical for women in vulnerable situations. The fifth and last area, Madam Program Director, is the inculcation of mindset shifts on societal expectations of gender roles. And this is to be done on a whole of society basis. Now, it is of course clear to achieve our shared vision of a fairer and more inclusive society for men and women, fundamental mindset shifts are needed. We can achieve these by modeling equitable and supportive relationships between men and women for our children. And to inculcate the values of fairness, equality, respect, and solidarity in our younger generations, the Ministry of Education has enhanced the school curriculum through the so-called Character and Citizenship Education Program to address mental models and stereotypes more directly, especially those that impact women in their career choices and familial roles. We will build upon current efforts and partner stakeholders and community partners to promote active fatherhood and share parenting responsibilities. Deputy Minister, distinguished participants, Madam Program Director, the implementation of the action plans in the White Paper on Singapore Women's Development will be spearheaded by the Ministry of Social and Family Development. However, to paraphrase an oft-quoted saying from Africa, it would take the whole Singapore village to turn the shared aspirations set out in the White Paper into reality. We will be building on already solid foundations, having seen how far women in Singapore have come. I would like to end, Madam Program Director, with your permission, my remarks with two quotes. The first is by Nelson Mandela, the first president of a fully democratic South Africa. In his autobiography, Long Walk to Freedom, Mr. Mandela acknowledged that men were not alone in resisting apartheid and wrote of the women in the 1956 march. The women, Madiba said, were courageous, persistent, enthusiastic, indefatigable, and their protest against passes set a standard for anti-government protest that was never equaled. Almost 40 years after the protest in 1994, Madiba honored the women and the spirit that drove them by declaring 9th of August Women's Day in South Africa. The other quote, Madam Program Director, is that by Singapore's founding Prime Minister, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew. In 1975, he said, "The only differences between men and women workers are the physical and biological ones. Women are equal to men in intellectual capacity. Societies which do not educate and use half of their potential because they are women are those which will be worse off." Now, Singapore and South Africa have different starting points as independent and fully democratic countries. However, many of our challenges are similar, as DM had said in her keynote address. More importantly, our aspiration to give everyone the opportunity to have all obstacles of unfairness, injustice, and discrimination removed so that he or she can dream and attain his or her full potential are very similar, whether one is in South Africa or one is in Singapore. For that reason, I congratulate once again my colleague, High Commissioner Lobe, and I congratulate once again you, Madam Director, all the supporters and sponsors of this program. And I'm also confident that the exchange between our two countries on women's development issues is not only relevant and timely, but also mutually beneficial in the larger context of which Deputy Minister had painted earlier. On that note, I wish you all a good discussion, and thank you so much for having me this morning in Pretoria and this afternoon in Singapore. With that, Madam Program Director, I hand back the floor to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Excellency, for that very powerful presentation. And that just go back to what DM says. We have so much in common. I mean, I was looking at your presentation of equality clause. We've got that equality clause in our constitution. You spoke about the highest number of women in parliament. We do have that. We also have gender parity in our cabinet. We don't have a woman president as yet. Now you've got a woman president. Those are the lessons that we must learn from Singapore. But I think one thing that we also need to learn from you, that we, as an ambassador in South Africa, you know how we are struggling with issues of gender-based violence and femicide. And I hear you saying that in the 5 key issues that you are dealing with, you have now a program that seeks to inculcate mind shifts on gender issues. And I think that is the way to go. And also, as you look at the curriculum at school, where they're teaching children about active citizenship, character. So I think those are the areas that South Africa, besides the business side, that we need to learn from Singapore. Because as we change with our National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide, one of the key issues that we are focusing on in South Africa is the issue on prevention. Because all other issues that we are dealing, we are reacting after violence has happened. And you're raising issues that are critical for us as South Africa. Active fatherhood, that is the worst thing that we are experiencing in the country. I think as you are in South Africa, you have seen the State South Africa report that indicates that almost 70% of children stay with mothers, not with their fathers. So I think we need to also to learn from Singapore. But there is something that will be another opportunity for dialogue in the country going forward, especially for the women's movement. I see in Singapore, one of the issues that women raised 30 years ago was the banning of polygamy. And that will be another dialogue another time, not on this platform. And thank you very much for your presentation. And I think for everyone, we need to give a round of applause for GM and His Excellency Mantaha for their keynote. And that has laid the foundation for this roundtable. Now, I'm going to then immediately go to part 1 of the first roundtable on women's economic and financial inclusion. That roundtable is going to be moderated by Ms. Zandi Bengu, and she will take us through that roundtable. Zandi Bengu is one young, vibrant young woman in the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, but one of our pillars in the Generation Equality Forum movement. So Zandi, I'm now giving over to you to deal with your roundtable on women's economic and financial inclusion.
Thank you, Usmabatu, and good morning and good afternoon to all the participants as well as panelists. My name is Zandi Bengu from the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, and thank you for the very kind introduction by Ms. Mabatu. So we actually have a very unfair advantage or disadvantage here. We had our principal speaking before us, and in diplomacy, we don't stop our bosses when they speak, but that unfortunately has eaten into our time, and I'm gonna have to be like a CFO of any company who's never liked by anyone in terms of being economical with the time. I'm busy, like literally I am I'm asking all the panelists to indulge me in terms of sticking to the time, because we don't really want to go way over the time that was allocated for ourselves. So as Osmabatu did mention, that the theme for our panel is women's financial and economic inclusion. This theme for us as South Africa is very important. When President Ramaphosa was the chair of AU in 2020, that was one of his focus areas, and as a result, it ushered in the decade for women and financial inclusion, economic and financial inclusion. That's a decade from 2020 to 2030, and at the African continental level. At the global level, what we have done to make sure that we synchronize our priorities and our focus at continental level, we went on to co-lead the Action Coalition on Economic Justice and Rights, which is under the Generation Equality Forum campaign by UN Women. We are doing this with Mexico representing Global South, as well as Spain, Germany, and Sweden representing Global North. So I am joined by very accomplished speakers today. I'm myself excited and inspired. I have Shudu, who is not only our former Miss South Africa, but also an advocate for educational and economic empowerment of women and children, also focusing strongly on mental health of women and children, as well as Ms. Caroline Beribe, who is a renowned legal expert in tax corporate structures. She is also a member of the SA Chamber of Commerce in Singapore. She herself holds or brings with herself vast experience of working with small and medium enterprises, and I'm hoping that as we're talking about economic and financial inclusion, we can actually draw some examples from Americas, as well as working in Asia on these issues, and just give some practical examples and advice for South Africa in this area. Also, we have Ms. Yavi Maduri, who is the CEO of Papua, and here she will, I'm sure many of you have heard about the African Continental Free Trade Area, which is our biggest continental framework aimed at accelerating and driving regional integration. So we will be hearing about the ongoing consultations on the protocol on women and youth in trade. And then we will be joined by Ms. Nomita, who is the founder of Sun Media, and she has extensively written on investment opportunities on the African continent. And I am hoping that for today, we can actually center our discussion on how do we move from contact to contract. What are some of the valuable or lessons and recommendations that she has for women-owned SMMEs in South Africa, and how can we partner with Singapore to make sure that there is stronger collaboration between our two countries? And then we also have Prof. Pendler, who is the African Women Leadership Network's Financial Inclusion Coordinator for South Africa. And she herself brings extensive experience in her role as an educator. And we will be hearing about her work in domestic working with domestic workers. The ambassador right now just spoke about the importance of the care economy, and that is something that is South Africa is very important, given that majority of our women are still in the informal sector, especially in the care economy. How do we make sure that the rights that we talk about in international, regional, as well as domestic frameworks are realized even for women who are in the informal sector? And then we have Ms. Murungwa, who is part of the Generation Equality Forum Youth Task Force of South Africa, who will be speaking about the intersectionality, the importance of intergenerational leadership when we talk about women, economic and financial inclusion, especially to what do we need to be doing to realize the socioeconomic rights of women and girls. And last but not least, we have Lei Peng, who's the Vice President of First Ladies, CEO of Shinda Group of Companies, and founder of Society A. And here I'm more interested in how, at a very young age, she realized the importance of bringing together other women to make sure that empowerment is taking into account the different hats that women do wear as caregivers at home, but at the same time as business-minded women. So I hope you're as excited as I am. Without trying to waste too much of your time, I am gonna ask Ms. Shudu to just come and give her perspective on what are some of the approaches and strategies that she believes we should be focusing on to make sure that there is that work-life balance, firstly, but secondly, what are some of the missing links that we have in terms of the educational as well as mental health priorities that can help us accelerate the achievement of economic empowerment of women and girls. Shudu, if you are on the call, please take the floor. All right, I'm going to come back to Shudu. I'm going to have to move directly to Ms. Caroline Beribe to just give us some of the advice. She has, like I said, experience working in Asia as well as in the Americas. One of the outcomes we are hoping to get out of this forum is to promote trade and export between South Africa and Singapore. We already have bilateral cooperation. How do we leverage the existing framework to make sure that it can deliver for women-owned SMMEs? So Caroline, I'm gonna give you the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Zandi, for asking this question. I'm really pleased to be with all of you this afternoon and this morning in South Africa. Just quick background, I'm not South African, as you'll see from my accent. I live in South Africa for a few years, and I'm on the executive director of the South Africa Chamber, but I'm Canadian by birth. So SME is probably, like, for me, like, the best way to promote trade. And I believe, like, South Africa and Singapore and even Canada, if I speak at a wider perspective, like SME is the backbone of the economy. So I believe, like, as a woman, it's really, really important to jump in. And of course, like, as when we finish school and when we decide to go on a working path, we have a few options, either going on the big corporate, we can work for the government, we can also start an SME. And for many individuals, not only women, but male and women, like, it's a bit of a scary path. So I know, like, one thing that what has been helping from a Canadian perspective, I was lucky enough to have the Minister Ang from Canada in May. And she's the Minister of Small and Medium-Sized Enterprise. And one thing that has been done in Canada, which, like, I think is replicated also in other countries, including Singapore and South Africa, is to have some funding for a woman-led project. So I think this is really important to keep in mind, which will help the promotion of empowerment of women. So funding is one way to help and favor, like, SMEs led by individual, including women, and have a fund dedicated for women. I also believe, like, education is key, in the sense that, once a woman decide to launch herself and decide to go an SME path, to have help and education, I mean, like, from people from the government, if there's a promotional board about what is the key path, like, if I'm a South African woman and I want to export, or I want to do trade in Singapore, Asia, like, what would be my 101 course that I should take, and vice versa for people in Asia who want to venture in Africa, using South Africa as a platform to penetrate the market. So education, like, is definitely key. And I believe, like, it would be important to either have, like, like private or public fund dedicated to educating women who want to start a small and medium-sized enterprise. Incubator, I feel, has been a good way to promote business. So, again, like, this is something that could be done in South Africa for a company wanting to go to explore the African market, and also for people from South Africa wanted to go to Asia, having a base where, like, like, without incurring too much cost, because of course SME, like, a startup costs some money, but having maybe, like, some incubator that are in place, which are interested to help. nurture like these startup company. Having like, you know, a mentor, you know, like associated, like, to, you know, like as soon as you decide to go to one or the other country, having a pool of people. And I guess there's two types of people. There'll be your mentor and there will be your sponsor. And I'm sure like most of you are aware of what's the difference, but I feel both are really important. The mentor will be the one that will, you know, like open door for you with who you're gonna like brainstorm your idea as a woman, but the sponsor will be like someone putting themselves at stake by pushing you, you know. So I feel like, you know, like having a pool in each country of these people who can help, you know, entrepreneur, people coming from the corporate, people coming from the government, a mixed pool of people who can like help, coach, do introduction, brainstorm about the business, the SME, the startup, the idea. And I say like, you know, like this can be a pool, a mixed pool of men and women, but we could also have a pool which is only like a woman's group who have been through it. For example, like I know like there's another lady who I know from South Africa who is also like a business woman, and I've been in Asia now for 24 years. So I had the chance to do 4 startups. I have sold 2 of them. One was a tech company, one was a manufacturing company, and the other one was a service provider. I still have these 2, but you know, like I came all the way from Canada when I was very young, like 21, 22 years old, and I had never been to Asia, and I just dive in, try my best, did a lot of networking. So you do have to be daring if you're any individual, but if you want to be a woman who is going to venture in Asia or vice versa to Africa, like I've been doing both, like as a Canadian going to Asia and going to Africa. So it has been, there was some challenge, but I feel like, you know, if you don't try, you won't know. So I always say to my kids, I have 3 kids, I say like, you know, like ask people, ask them for help. If you don't ask, you don't get. So I think like a mantra that many women, and I think it's because of how we have been all brought up, like we usually don't ask, you know, asking like looks makes you feel vulnerable, but businesswoman or not businesswoman, if you don't ask, you won't get. So you have to ask for opportunity. You have to go see people like Chamber of Commerce. How can I get some help? Do you know people in my field? How can I get some funding? Is there anything available in Singapore? Is there anything available in South Africa? So getting like, you know, your name out and being proactive, I think are definitely key to help promotion and trade between the 2 countries. So I would say like to recap, like, you know, funding, education, like, you know, on both countries, both continents, having incubator, having pool of mentor and sponsor, and having probably a specific group of women where we feel like, you know, we can share more and we can ask questions without barrier. I think it's probably good ways to promote trade between the 2 continents and the 2 countries.
Thank you so much, Caroline. And I think these are very, very practical, because if I was a businesswoman, I believe that this is very valuable input that you've just made in terms of how do I, from scratch, how do I start up a business, even if it means I have to move out of my own country to follow where opportunities are. You spoke to very fundamental issues: education, funding for women-led projects, because we do believe that as governments, we need to be very intentional in terms of supporting women-owned businesses. In the case of South Africa, our president last year launched a Women's Economic Assembly, which is aiming to do exactly this, to say, let's come together, let's focus on women, on all their needs, from trade to exports and export promotion, as well as how do you make sure that within the country, how do women-owned SMMEs trade with big corporates, who are usually the main focus of government trade missions. So thank you so much for that. I'm gonna have to jump and go to Namita. Namita, you have written extensively on Africa and the many investment opportunities. So I am just wondering if you can zoom in into what specifically what are some of the recommendations that you have for women-owned SMMEs? And between South Africa and Singapore, what are some of the practical strategies and approaches that we can have to make sure that while we want to leverage partnerships with big corporates, but just between ourselves, what can we do to leverage the existing bilateral frameworks that we have? Over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for organizing a wonderful conference at very short notice. And Her Excellency must have done a lot of good work back in South Africa to be able to pull it through within a few days, and first 100 days. My congratulations. Our ambassador to South Africa has laid a very good roadmap for what has been done and what is being done, and the different things that Singapore stands for. For me personally, I feel that we have to come out of this computer screen and meet in person, for things to move. And for that, I agree that we should, first of all, we must first make a circle of goodwill, at least with the women who are on the screen today. So we put our strengths together and we handhold each other and discuss what are your strengths. Add on my strengths to it, and we get people moving between South Africa and Singapore. We get goods moving between Singapore and South Africa. We get people coming, we get women coming for conferences both ways, where they carry their wares, they carry their services that they are good at, and we actually transact business. In my opinion, the most important factor in leveling the field for women anywhere in the world is education. Singapore has a very structured education system, and it has proven credentials. I think Singapore and South Africa should work in the direction of collaborating in education, in primary, secondary, tertiary education, and learn from each other. So delegations who can move between Singapore and South Africa in the fields of education. There's another thing, your country is so beautiful and so is mine. Mine is tiny, small, well-kept, pretty, and within a short period of time, you can really enjoy many, many things. So I would like to invite all of you. Next year, we should make this conference in Singapore. Sun Media conducts many women conferences in Singapore where many countries are involved. And we would be very delighted if there's a delegation of South African women who come to Singapore and share their experiences or whatever they want to sell. So that is number 2, collaboration in education. Then the other thing is all of us are a unit of influence within our homes. How do we bring up our daughters at home? Do we give them equal opportunities? How do we raise our children? What is the South African experience? What is the experience in Singapore? If we have come further, either which way, what are the best practices and how do we share it? Because it is another thing to, widen your scope of what you want to achieve from country to country, but the basic unit of influence remains still your home. So what is it that you are doing right in your home, whether it's in South Africa or Singapore? We must, when we meet either on screen or when we meet in person, discuss how am I managing my children? How am I making them citizens of tomorrow? How am I eliminating gender inequality in my home place? Am I putting in as much dollars for my daughter as I'm putting for my son? If I'm doing those things, then I think our society is going to progress. The framework of bilateral ties between Singapore and South Africa is very, very solid. South African products are very well known and very well accepted in Singapore society. But what I feel is we can go beyond. We know the wines mostly and we love them, but we can see other avenues. Another thing which I would recommend is that we should have Singaporeans visit South Africa and do some kind of charity work within South Africa, where we contribute our hours of learning what we know best from Singapore and train our little girls, little daughters and enable them, because they always say that it's going to be a long way off till gender equality is achieved. But we must, all of us, accelerate the pace of what we can do so that it doesn't take that long for us to be equal to men. Then the other thing is, Singapore is making little progress in everything, but it is still way off. We have better represented in our government now. We are more represented in boards now. Many Singaporean women own their businesses, and we are not discriminated in that sense. But at the same time, when we have children, we are out of our, we have to maybe leave our jobs and stuff like that. That puts us at a disadvantage. So this circle of influence and circle of goodwill that we create among women, maybe we can create some kind of a platform. While one of us is having babies and rearing them, we can help each other so that that person who is out of that job is still able to be accepted. Maybe I can give her a job. Maybe women on this forum can give her a job. Or we can, pull in 2 hours each to, compensate for the time while she's looking for a job. We find solutions like that. Then we are not marginalized, we're not alone, and we are not waiting for someone else to level our field, because it is we cannot demand equality, we have to earn it. And that's exactly what I feel, that we can collaborate in these many ways, where we come together, exchange ideas, share what we know, and mentor each other and hold each other's hands, with, of course, our brothers, our men, holding our hands with us as well. And also, how do we change the narrative of bringing up boys? Are we still making them superior to the girls we have at home? And if we are not mindful of that, that is another narrative which we have to share with each other, so that at every point we are making little steps in order to have that equality between the two genders around the world. That's my sharing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Namita. You actually spoke to very practical things, and some of the critical things that we need to be looking into. For an example, it starts in the home. We say family is a basic unit for human development. How we raise our boys and girls is very important, because that's where equality, that's where we set the tone, and that is very important. You spoke about education collaboration and the achievements Singapore has made, where in South Africa we make so much investment, yet our outcomes have not reached the standards where we wish it could be. So there's lots of sharing of best practices that we can do in terms of practical things. You spoke about exchange missions. That is something that for me is very exciting, because I've been hearing a lot of demand from South African businesswomen who are saying, take us on missions, on export missions, because we want to explore the different markets. We want to talk to our counterparts. My president normally says, as government, we can only open doors, but we don't have the eye for business. So we need this can be utilized, as you're saying, the cycle of goodwill. We can pull our resources together to make sure that we practicalize this exchange of missions, and conferences is one. So I myself will make sure that by next year we can collaborate, and this is something that South Africa can do to make sure that we have a delegation at your next conference. So thank you so much for all the recommendations you have made, and I'm sure we can continue this discussion outside this panel. Now I'm going to move on to Prof. Pendler. Prof. Pendler, not only does she have an extensive experience as an educator with University of South Africa, but she has done lots of work as an advocate for domestic workers. So coming back to care economy that you just touched on yourself, to say, while policies may be there to empower women in the workplace, we need to make sure that women, there's a balance in terms of work-life balance. Women are still caregivers. How do we make sure that we have policies in place that actually support both their roles as entrepreneurs as well as mothers at home. So Prof, I'm going to ask you to just, for one, to speak on the role of education as a catalyst for women's and girls' financial inclusion. And secondly, I'm going to ask you to speak on your experience on supporting domestic workers and their realization for financial and economic inclusion, given that they're operating in the informal space, which is normally left behind when we come up with economic policies. Prof, over to you. Prof Pendler? May I confirm if I'm audible to you?
Sorry.
Oh, yes.
I forgot to unmute and I started talking. Indeed, it's an honor to be part of a conversation on women's socio-economic rights and empowerment. As Aulin SA Pillar Coordinator of Financial and Economic Inclusion, let me first acknowledge our President, Honorable Mayor Charlotte Lobe, Mr. Zainal Mantaha, Deputy Minister Ms. Pinky Kekana, and everyone in this platform. Warm greetings. We know that historically, or the historic divide and rule philosophy of apartheid created many discriminatory existences and realities for different groups, allotting different levels of power to different groups over a period of 40 years. One would think that after 28 years since the dawn of the new democracy, the status quo would have improved, but we know the truth. So while financial inclusion is about the adoption, usage, and sustainability of financial services, it is generally linked to socio-economic development. It faces numerous challenges in South Africa. Recently, research was conducted by Boston Consulting Group into the state of financial inclusion in South Africa. It revealed some key reasons why South Africans are not big on banking. Let me highlight a few which systematically excludes those in the lower economic strata, especially such as women, vendors, casual workers, and in particular domestic workers. I'm just going to look at the banking system because when you talk about access, we talk about banking, we talk about insurance, we talk about credit, we talk about as well as savings. So this is about access. The fee structure as one of the challenges, it limits it excludes many people. The fee structure of South African banks is up to 4 times higher than countries such as Germany, Australia, and even India. However, it is important to teach women, that's where education comes in, especially from the lower economic strata, that it is better to save money in banks than carry cash. On the other hand, banks need to reduce their fees. For instance, we have banks such as, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to mention banks, but we have at least 2 banks in South Africa which offers very low fees. One offers even 30 cents to transact anytime, and sometimes you don't even pay a cent. So we need to educate women to take advantage of institutions with very low fee structures. Another problem is there's a general sense of mistrust in banking motives or banks' motives, because first of all, in the past, people were exploited. Past abuses such as the inappropriate marketing and selling of financial products, where people were shown something which was different at the end. So education is essential to teach women that it is important to invest in insurances, it is important to save, it is important to use credit with care. The third concern is about fraud. Concern of fraud negate the convenience of cashless transaction. While some people in low income brackets do not utilize mobile and internet banking simply due to lack of familiarity, the fear of fraud involving ATMs, mobile internet banking. So it is important for us to make sure that we teach our people, because they also have a right to technology, and we are moving so fast away from cashless, I mean, of cash. So, and then therefore it is important for us to make sure that it's not about a transaction on face-to-face. It is also about using the digital technology that we have. To address this challenge, education needs to play a bigger role. Domestic workers in particular should be trained on how to use ATMs, mobile and internet banking, raise awareness around cybercrime through use of social platforms, go to where these women are, such as in parks, bus stations, stock fairs, churches, to share essential information, maybe in pamphlets or by word of mouth. The fourth one, people value a sense of community with trusted fund. In our country, I mean, we grew up knowing about stock fairs, but these stock fairs can turn into vehicles which can produce more wealth to these women. I mean, stock fairs is not about saving money and then you get that money again at the end of the year. If we teach our women that stock fairs can help them buy shares, property, they can own businesses. So education is very, very essential in this work. Some of the things that I've done in my time, and as I'm working with domestic workers, is as well to make sure that we help them bank, we help them maybe move away from machonisa, because in South Africa we have got these loan sharks which are called machonisa. At the end of the day, you find that families lose a lot of money because of this very thing of machonisa. But banks, on the other hand, they require someone to have a pay slip, bank statement, and for a loan to be approved. You find that now it's a dichotomy. On the other side, women don't have anywhere to go because banks cannot give them loans. They end up going to machonisa. So it is a very, very dicey situation, because we need to work every day and help these women to understand that there are ways of making sure that they still have their money. No one will take it from them. So the way forward for South Africa's poor are particularly vulnerable due to widespread of financial illiteracy, exacerbating the sense of mistrust and level of exploitation fostered by these practices. Unfortunately, this is a systemic education problem within South Africa that cannot be addressed in a short term. So for our lean, in the next year, we are going to concentrate on many strategies to reach out to women, especially to women in the rural areas, to reach out to those in the lower rung or in the lower stratas of the economy, to bring more people into the financial system. We have the ability to enhance the GDP growth. We will be able to reduce poverty and create markets opportunities for private sectors. Achieving financial inclusion is therefore a critical milestone on the path towards realizing the promise of the Rainbow Nation. In closing, however, a more innovative approach to financial inclusion is required in South Africa. While regulations by the government can act as a catalyst, financial institutions will need to work together with the public and private sectors. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. You've just spoken to very critical issues, because it is easy to talk about financial and economic inclusion, but how do we unpack it? You've just unpacked it nicely for us. And the overall from what you were saying is that we do need to have gender responsive financial products, because what is the point of having financial products that are not speaking to the needs of women entrepreneurs? And we need to find them. We need to understand that they may not be the ones that have websites. We need to find them in their informal sectors, because that is an actual economy that is driving our country as well. So the issue of financial literacy, that is a very key one. And I was just looking at Caroline, and I'm like, Caroline, in your work advising banks and businesses, these are some of the things that I think need to be incorporated to say, are you sure you know who you're talking to? How are you not reaching? How is How are your products not contributing to the economic growth of the country you're operating in, and also just making sure that we have more women participating in the economy? So I already, Namita, as you were saying, that we can already use this forum to make sure that we start something, we start a cycle where we can put our resources, and I can see how we can already just out the different expertise that you are bringing into this discussion, how we can actually have practical projects out of this. But thank you so much. So for now, I'm gonna go to Ms. Murungwa, and here I'm going to ask her to just speak to the importance of intergenerational leadership in the realization of socio-economic rights. So Murungwa, you have experience working in the Youth Task Force of the Generation Equality Forum, and in terms of the economic justice and rights, which South Africa is co-leading, it's based on 4 pillars. That's the care economy, it's decent work, it's financial inclusion, as well as access to productive resources. So I'm gonna ask Murungwa to just bring her experience as a young person in South Africa who's also an entrepreneur herself, to say what are the gaps that you are seeing, and what from this conversation, how do you see this practical cooperation benefiting young people? Because we tend to lump women together and say, oh, women empowerment, but we do know that age does matter. So I'm going to ask you to just come and bring the youth perspective to this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Program Director. Good afternoon to Her Excellency Charlotte Lobe, South African High Commissioner to Singapore, African Women Leaders SA President as well, and members of Diplomatic Corps, as well as highly esteemed panelists and guests joining us from Singapore. Good morning to the Deputy Minister in the Presidency, Pinky Kekane, the African Women Leaders Network South African Political Pillar Coordinator, as well as the distinguished panelists and guests joining us from South Africa. Greetings to His Excellency Mantaha from Singapore, the High Commissioner from Singapore to South Africa. Program Director, I stand on all established protocol, and thank you and the Commission in Singapore for giving us this wonderful opportunity to reflect on some of the important issues regarding generational equality, its ambitions, as well as the journey that we are taking in establishing and moving forward towards, an inclusive and equal society, realizing the economic rights of young women and girls, and having an intergenerational co-leadership. There have been so many international commitments that support women's economic empowerment all over the world, coming from the Beijing Platform for Action, the Convention of Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, as well as a series of the International Labour Organization's conventions on gender equality. We've taken great strides in many of these, trying to implement and push forward towards gender equality and gender parity in South Africa. However, the disparities are still quite large and remain. Something that remains quite fresh in our minds is the debate on Banyana Banyana, who came back with victory to the South African landscape, only to be faced with the reality of the differences in the pay gap. And that reminds us that an inclusive society is a society that continuously strives for the equal pay for equal work. And irrespective of what the challenges may be, that is an ambition we should strive for. One of the key things that you have mentioned, Program Director, is the issue of an intergenerational co-leadership, the leadership of young people alongside those who are wise and know the road for longer. I must congratulate Ms. Charlotte Lobe for continuously showing us and charting the course in this regard, by showing us that young people, young women, always deserve to have the voice and the participation alongside anybody else. And they are not less, they are not future leaders, they are leaders in their respective rights, in their respective zones today, and therefore deserve equal participation and equal amplification of their voices even today. As you would see, this Singapore South African Roundtable, a first of its kind within 100 days of office, is quite balanced with regards to the intergenerational landscape, and reflective of the ambitions of Ms. Lobe in showing us how this should be done throughout, all the echelons of leadership. One thing that we are sorely lacking in South Africa is to see a true reflection of this intergenerational leadership within the echelons of governance, of political leadership, of business leadership. We see that the trade table does not reflect, youthful participation due to the high restrictions and the barriers and to entry, as well as to access for young people. You would ask a young person for collateral, and I wonder, where should they have accumulated the collateral in the time that they have been in existence here on earth? Yet they have shown their commitment, they have shown their passion, and their revenues within their businesses reflect that they have the capacity to grow beyond, their restraints. However, the system keeps them out due to those requirements that they cannot necessarily meet. So when we speak about an intergenerational landscape, we speak about policy that is reflective of our ambitions, policy that accommodates not an ideal that is outside the realities of our existence. For example, in South Africa, we have the Public Finance Management Act that is supposed to, stimulate competition. It's supposed to ensure fair access for people. But in actuality, what it does, it serves as a restriction for young people, and particularly women who have previously been disadvantaged in their ability to reach certain, thresholds and goals within the business terrain, and therefore cannot have put aside to ensure that they are stimulated and they are grown. This disparity shows that sometimes we speak and have a lip service of, intergenerational ambitions, growing young women businesses, ensuring that people who are previously disadvantaged have access. But what we do in terms of policy speaks otherwise and forms a gatekeeping of a special kind. So this is our plea as the Generation Equality Forum to those who are in positions of power to ensure that as and when we are adapting our policies are in line with our ambitions of ensuring an equal society. Not only our policies, but our budgets, the way we spend our money as government, as well as, citizens of our various respective countries, should reflect our ambitions to promote a gender and equal society. I know that all our time has been well spent. So for now, that should just bring us to the end of what we are trying to establish as the Generation Equality Forum: leadership of young women in all spheres, economic empowerment and skills development of young women, and action on ensuring that women are safe in the various spaces in which they interact. Thank you, Program Director, Your Excellencies, and all the highly esteemed guests that joined in today on our panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Murunga. I do know that I've been rushing you, but like I did say, I'm gonna play the role of the CFO that is never liked by anyone in this case, because I don't really have time. Time is our currency in this discussion. But yes, you did touch on very important issues, mentioning that our policies should always be reflective of our ambition, and we must not pay lip service to intergenerational leadership, and understanding that young people are not leaders of the future, but they are leaders now, today, and not put policies must be utilized to enable their participation in the economy and not to restrict them, as we normally do, asking for unreasonable number of experience in terms of the workplace, in terms of the work that they do. But also I'm seeing commonalities in terms of what other speakers have spoken to or recommended, such as mentorship and sponsorship. These are practical things that we need to be looking into to say, how can we assist young people who want to enter the space, who want to trade, and to make sure that we can actually promote their economic and financial inclusion. So now I don't know if Yavi is back. Yavi, please do give an indication if you are back.
Zandi, she is still speaking in the other panel she is in.
Okay, no, that is fine. In that regard, I'm gonna have to ask Miss yes, Leipingbeck. I think you've been, yes, you've been with us. So in terms of the work that you have been doing, as I indicated earlier on, that you started a ladies collective or collaboration that focuses on giving back to the women of the society, understanding their role as that of being at the heart of the family. And we already spoke about the family being the basic unit for development. So I just want to know, in your view, why is it important to invest in women, and what are some of the critical skills that you think we should be focusing on in terms of the work-life balance, and to make sure that women actually thrive as entrepreneurs? Over to you.
Yes, thank you. Very good afternoon from Singapore. I am very, after hearing all your sharing, I think I must say that I'm very privileged to be a female in Singapore. So I try my best to share, and if there are any opportunities for us to connect and to create further impact for our younger generations, please include me. I'm totally for future advancements, because it takes generations to build the conversations. So as His Excellency Mentaha actually shared earlier on what Singapore has progressed over this past 50 years, we celebrated with, a year of women's development last year, and it has gone on to white paper, and policies were actually passed in order to advance women's rights in Singapore. I wear multiple hats. I'm a mother of 4. I'm a second generation family business leader. I am the CEO for my Shinda Group of companies, which was started by my father. And I am also a businesswoman. I started my own brand, which is Society A, and also other brands. So I want to share on my firsthand experience for my journey so far, which is I feel for a society, for me to even think about being able to do so many things that I can do. I really have to thank our visionary leaders here in Singapore and the women who, founded our Singapore Council of Women, then went on to SCWO, which I'm a board member of right now. And also for passing the Women's Charter to advance our women's rights here. So really, these grounds were laid even before I was born. So, and having gone through the having gone through the education system here in Singapore, I grew up not assessing my limitations as a woman. I grew up always looking out for potentials in every situation that I am in. I think that is a huge, huge, huge privilege for any woman here in Singapore. And look at where I am now. So I think society, leaders, politics, policies and all, even for business, whether SMEs or MNCs working as a female professional or as a female entrepreneur later on in your life, due to caregiving duties that you may have, you can't perform your duties as a professional, but it doesn't stop you from creating your own business, right? So I feel like all these possibilities can only happen when we have the same consciousness as a society to make things happen for everyone. And I really admire South Africa. I've been to South Africa and also East Africa. I am amazed at how much resources you all have. Singapore has 0. So I think the potential in Africa is immense. I'm sure this is what Singaporeans will really drool, because we have nothing and we have to create everything with our bare hands and with the visions of our leaders. So just to give a bit of a context, from 2016 to 2021, we have 100% increase of women on board for the top 100 listed companies in Singapore. So in 2021, we have about 18% of women on board for these top 100 listed companies. And interestingly, for our stat boards, they are at 28%, which is 10% more than private companies. So I think it shows light on how the government is really supportive of the female narrative here in Singapore. And in 2020, we have 30% female employers. And we also have 77% of women who are actively employed. And this is not a dip across over the years, it's actually an increase over the years. So this is very positive for women here in Singapore. And just to bring the narrative closer to what I do as a CEO for, a civil engineering company, my family has been part of Singapore's water story for the past 5 decades. And from a highly local and male-dominated industry, today we have progressed to have close to 65% of our females in white-collar jobs. And although majority of our workforce are foreigners, they used to be locals, now it's majority are foreigners for our blue collars, but for our white collars, 50% are foreigners. So I think for businesses to grow and for opportunities to thrive, we have to be global. You can start small, but the perspective has to be global, because then you can attract the right people to contribute to the same values that you want to spearhead. So I really feel that we women must see ourselves as like the light tower. Sometimes we are lonely out where we are, but we shine light so that others can see the path and lead them to where, they want to be. It's up to them to take the choice and the steps that they want to take. And I note that women, we take on multiple roles in the course of our lives, right? From being a daughter to a mother to a caregiver and to an aging parent, it's tough. We have a lot of hats to take on, but I think these make us stronger and more resilient. We just need a support system that enable us to exercise the life choices that we have in every milestone of our life journey. So diversity must thrive in order for women to feel they don't feel less to be part of this system. I find that through my social activities as a vice president for Ladies First and as a board member for SCWO, I must say that the impact of a fellow woman is immeasurable. So drawing on our strengths of empathy, compassion, and connection, female leaders and mentors, we must embrace, for me, I feel that we must embrace this softer DNA that women possess, which is empathy. And this will allow us to connect and communicate effectively as a team, as a board member, and overall to the company and the society that we're in. So as mentioned in the chat, I also believe that our other superpower as a female is connection, which is what we have here today. So let's continue to connect. And technology has been great. It has broken down a lot of barriers. I feel that we should definitely leverage on this to enable the younger women, or in general women from Singapore to South Africa or any part of the world, and be globally connected. Okay, so to end, I would like to emphasize that growing up, not growing up, but I feel that we must have visionary leaders in the system to enable an education system that will groom our future female leaders and mentors, and to possess an elevated mindset of wanting to connect to make the next generation of progress for our women in Africa and Singapore. So thank you for today, and let's connect.
Many thanks for this soundbite. Wow, I don't even know how to summarize. You spoke to so many issues. First of all, we welcome your readiness to collaborate in the mentorship and the empowerment of young women who want to be in entrepreneurship. But you also just spoke to the issue of visionary leadership, which is something that is very important. We have heard many speakers talking about the importance of policy, but equally for our country, what we've learned is that policy alone is not sufficient. We need implementation of that policy, especially when employment is not only in the public sector but the private sector. How do we make sure that everyone sees a role for themselves in terms of the implementation of policies that are geared towards empowerment of women? So that is very important, and I think there's something we can learn from Singapore, how you've increased the number of women in the different boards, while at the same time encouraging or entrepreneurship through the education system and many other opportunities that your country has provided. But also the issue of just having the same consciousness to want to see this empowerment of women and girls as a society. I think that is very critical. Women empowerment should never be seen as a side issue. There's general economic empowerment and economic development that the country is focusing on. And then on the side, you want to talk about women empowerment. No, it should be mainstreamed in all the work that we are doing in all the policy frameworks. So these are very critical issues. And also for South Africa, you did mention the issue of migration. You spoke about how in terms of your board members and some of your entrepreneurs being dominated by actually foreign nationals. That is something that I think globally, not just South Africa, that we're still battling on how to embrace migration as a tool for economic development, pulling all the different skill set that is brought by migrants that come to the country. How do we make sure that we do not, it does not take place in such a way that it affects or negatively affects the lower class of any society, that it can be something that everyone in the society can embrace, can understand that we all want to do the same thing, which is the economic development of the country. So that is very, very important. But also what I did like is the mentioning of the many superpowers that women have. Most of the time we've been convinced that these are the weaknesses that women have in terms of leadership. You can't be too empathetic as a woman. It's a sign of weakness. But here you are saying that actually, no, when we do pull together, it is our empathy that pushes us to actually do better. We can mentor each other better. We can collaborate better when we are able to understand each other's situations, because as a woman, like you rightfully said, you're not just a board member or a CEO, but you're also a mother. You are also a caregiver. You're also a daughter. How do we bring all these different roles together to make sure that at the end of the day, this woman is empowered in all the different heads that she's wearing? So thank you so much for all this learning that you've given. I've learned so much myself, and I cannot wait to take this outside this forum. Yavi, are you back? Osmabatu, given the limited time that we have, I'm gonna have to hand it back to you. And before I do that, just wanna thank all my panelists. This was very amazing. All your recommendations are very practical, and I cannot wait to see this as just a starting point of our dialogue. And as I said, the intention of this dialogue was to make sure that we can actually come up with practical proposals to move from contact to contract. So I do hope that as we move forward, this is what's going to happen. At the next forum, we'll be able to say, oh, actually, it was because of that forum that we had that today South African young entrepreneurs are actually collaborating with a company in Singapore. So thank you very much. Osmabatu, I'm handing it back to you.
Thank you very much, Zandi, and your panel. This has been an eye-opener. We have learned so much. We will definitely connect Ms. Leipeng. We will definitely look at those exchange missions. I mean, I can just see South Africa and Singapore women starting a revolution that African Women Leadership Network wants to see happening through the office of Her Excellency, Charlotte Lobe. when I was listening to all the presentations on women's economic and financial inclusion, I was thinking of the dinner that we had yesterday with the president of Ethiopia, Madam Salwek Zud. What she said as a patron for African Women Leadership Network, that for me, as we build back better, she was saying, let us not be trees that hide the forest. Let us use our shoulders for women to climb on them and fly. So I'm looking at this roundtable as the shoulder that we are laying for women, for young women, for women with disabilities to climb on and fly in both nations, so that when we look back in 5 years to come, as we're looking at Beijing plus 30 and tick all the achievements that we will be taking towards 2030, we can look back and say it was on the 31st of August 2022 that this one flew from our shoulders. I'm now calling the next panel on changing the gender narrative through performing arts. That panel will be moderated by none other than Ms. Zanyiwe Mtatisi Azare, who is the Deputy President for African Leadership Network South Africa and the CEO of Digitally Legal. Zanyi is with me here in Addis, and you are going to, after this, go directly into the other session. Thank you very much.
Good day, everybody, and it's been such an interesting conversation, really eye-opening, and just illustrating the immense power that this relationship, this Singapore-South Africa relationship that's almost 30 years old has. One of the biggest highlights, I think, for me in this entire conversation or dialogue today is just looking at the immense exposure and access that this relationship can bring to each and every one of the individuals, their networks, and I think each and every woman in both countries. Without any further ado, I am going to be quite like my colleague Zandi and jump straight into it. We will keep our speeches 5 minutes long, and then I will be doing an overall question and answer session. So if we could please have Ms. Or maybe let me do this. Let me just present my panel. So we've got Ms. Wang Ling Tay. She's a Singaporean actress. She's been on SBC. She's been on TCS, and she's part of the Media Corporation. We've also got Ms. Jarose Jafta, who's a poet in South Africa. And we've also got Ms. Priyanka, apologies for that. We've got Ms. Priyanka Beret, who's a psychotherapist, author, and consultant. And then we also have Ms. Mathilde Brenholk, who will be joining us today. So if I could humbly request for Ms. Wang Ling Tay to please take the floor. We are very excited to hear what you have to say on this topic. And just to reintroduce the topic for this session is changing the gender narrative through the performing arts. Ms. Wang Ling Tay, please take the floor.
Thank you. Good morning, South Africa. Good afternoon, Singapore. Honorable Deputy Minister Pinky Kakane, Her Excellency Ms. Charlotte Lobe, and His Excellency Zaina Matbaha. Madam Programs Director, fellows panels, attendees all. Thank you today for having me on this round table. I am a very blessed product of Singapore myself in performing arts. I'm born Singaporean. In the 80s, I joined SPC. That's what made me, as years go, make me a public figure. I'm always a speaker for non-smoking. This is easy to put it out, to share with friends, especially in school. I join national parades, and I'm always against plastic surgery. For me, to live simple, to live real is my motto. Till today, even though I've been staying overseas, I have stayed overseas for more than 20 years in Panama, in South Africa, your country, your beautiful country. I'm a PR, and I love your country too much. So as a woman, I think it's important for me to share with my friends back here in Singapore, to travel with me to your beautiful country. I'm joining a travel agent to join them and bring them to make, to help and make Singapore have a stronger relationship with South Africa. Not this, I help a lot on this charity when I was in South Africa, because my husband is a head of mission in South Africa. But as a woman, I do my part. I even train people as domestic worker to work in friends' home. And these are little things that I can do, that I can help. And also to bring friends whenever they visit me, I will introduce. That time, the first time when I went to South Africa, you have Marabasta, you have all these wet markets and local crafts. I will bring them to introduce, which I agree that they really have beautiful crafts that we can share with our friends. And myself, I'm always here in Singapore. Right now, I'm living in Singapore. I know that I'm a public person, so public figure. People are looking at me all the time. And I always believe, use the best thing we have at home. We can have our great varieties of food at the hawker center. I don't need to be seen as a public face. I don't need to be seen eating at a high-class restaurant. I support local. These are little things that I can do. I take a public transport. As long as I don't talk, nobody really recognizes who I am. Unless I say, because today we are all wearing masks. Unless I speak or I say something to a friend or somebody asks me a question, because sometimes people recognize me, say, you're taking the public transport. I say, yes, sir. Or yes, ma'am. These are things that as a daughter, as a mother, these are things that I want to do, to share with my children, with my neighbors. These are little things that I can do. For me, I would love to. I know that Singapore and South Africa has very good relationship. I would like to strengthen it in my own way to bring more friends and share with friends in South Africa, and hopefully friends in South Africa will visit us more in Singapore. And that is what I want to share today. Thank you. Oh, before I close it, there was a research that I heard that Harvard has a research that a woman there's a woman or man that's lack of woman's friend is as bad as smoking. So please make sure you have many close friends that they are women. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I really enjoyed that, and we've learned a lot of lessons from that. We'll definitely take from the Harvard research and ensure that we are not affecting ourselves in the same manner as smoking. And we'll keep our women friends very close to us. And I think it was quite excellent the way that you put it there, to really emphasize the role of each one of us in how we can, one, not just assist the arts, but assist local economies, support culture, support tradition, and also ensure that, you know, like you said, keep women close, create and harness camaraderie and that network of women around us. But thank you so much for that. We will have a question and answer session afterwards. And thank you for keeping to time. That's excellent. Good leadership there. I'm going to call my next panelist to join us. And I really think that the way that we've started, the flow that we started this conversation really assists to you know, show that there's so many different elements of the value chain that we can contribute to and that we can be part of, and that there's a place for each and every one of us, and using our skill sets. And as Ms. Wang Ling Case said, we need to ensure that we do what we can, you know, do our best to ensure that the economies in our country scale, to ensure that we are part of the growth. I'm going to ask Ms. Jaros Jafta to join us, but I think before we do that, I would really like to make an announcement and a heartfelt condolences from the Ireland team and all members present. So Ms. Jafta's mom passed away, unfortunately, yesterday, and we really would like to just have a few moments of silence just to acknowledge and honor her mom before she joins us. Thank you so much for that. Ms. Jafta, we really appreciate your presence today under the difficult circumstances. So I'm going to give you the floor and we'll be all ears. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, South Africa, and good afternoon in Singapore. To all protocol observed today, warm greetings. My name is Nthabiseng Jaros Jafta. I am a performing poet, an author, a writer, a publisher, and a founder of Motso Creative and Cultural Institute, and also the deputy president of the National Writers Association of South Africa. So I'm quite a very grounded and an activist of my own in putting writing and the literary arts and the performing arts forward. And quite intentional about writing the woman as an opportunity. And for some reason from last week, as we had our preparations, what this session has done for me is that true empowerment really starts within. And sometimes we must really own up and stop with being modest and really, really take up spaces and just contribute to humanity as a whole. So for me, really, the arts creative sector, a fiber expression gives us freedom in any way, and how we position our countries in how the world is mirrored. Normally it is because of the arts, it is because of our tourism, it is because of our films, it's because of our songs, what we put out there. And it is quite important that also as creators, as we continue to create, we are intentional of the type of content that we are producing out there, because we know our industries are quite challenged with substance abuses, with sexual harassment, particularly for women, because class and power is always against a woman. So when a woman needs to rise, sometimes you have to rise 10 times higher than what a man can rise in a predominantly powered ground, because men businesses and entrepreneurship in our industry is quite in the forefront, and women are just literally rising, and oftentimes they are rising in the front of the stage as performers, as those ones who are holding the mic, but hardly as promoters, hardly as PR agents, hardly as managers, hardly as owners of companies who basically have the means of production, the buying power, the financial empowerment that we are talking about. So this platform of inclusion for finances, for economic equality is quite key, because that's exactly what our industry needs. Yes, few women are rising. We can literally just count them, you know, but as compared to the industry itself from pre-94 and what is happening now, it is quite evident that males and male supremacy, it's still quite the core of our industries. So we are quite challenged in that fashion. However, we have seen women from probably 2000 until now rising in various spheres in our industries. We are writing our books, we are owning our stories, we are publishing those stories, we are sharing those stories with the world, because we have also realized the importance of not coming up anymore from that place of vulnerability, but taking ownership and owning our spaces and really contributing in our different corners. So what I have been doing is teaching young girls in schools and now in colleges and universities, linking them with other universities, raising funds for them to go into other universities, and even with our own institute, contributing towards performing in literary arts, but also to entrepreneurship, which is entrepreneurship, because our talent is our currency. And the sooner we treat those talents as businesses, the sooner we treat those products that we produce, those books that we publish, those films that we have, those music, and owning those masters and copyrights, and we have our product in our hand, it is important for us also to find those access to markets, so that we are exchanging in different parts of the world, so that we are able to sell, we are able to inter-exchange, we are able to work together in collaborations culturally and otherwise, so that this economic emancipation that we are talking about, we are living it, we are expressing it, we are in it with full force. So that's what Interviewing Jafta is about. So most of the books that I published predominantly are women. The festivals that I curate, oftentimes highest percentages is women. The girls that are in our institute, most of them are women, because we are truly intentional about rising with other women through education, through expression, through giving them a voice and an option to say, you too can. You are allowed to dream, your dreams are valid, and they can go as wide as you envision and as your imagination can go in developing your own worldview. So this is what we are doing. So we have a catalog of books written by women, by ourselves in collaborations, from poetry compilations, from children's books, from novels, you name it. And these are the books that have been taking us through parts of the world where we're exchanging with other women to share our stories and to share what we are about and who we are. So in a nutshell, that's what Interviewing Jafta is, and that's the things that she's up to and doing in her corner in South Africa and in the world. I thank you.
Thank you so much for that.
Can I do a poem for you?
Please do.
Yes.
Yes.
She is me because I am her. She wears beer bottle caps on her sober ears, money clips as earrings. She prefers printed t-shirts for her. They represent the calabash full of hopes, dreams, and desires. She is mad. Some call her weird. Big earring girl, loves living. She chucks that tailor and she walks it. She's an old school type of girl with a touchy sense of elegance, exclusivity, and extraordinary is a must-have. At prints written on her forehead. At loves her and she loves it too. She would climb on that poetry and she would not mind to fall on words, for they would catch her even before she reaches the soil. Even little rocks won't be too hard on her, because she is me and I am her. You are me and I am you. We gotta go bona mohlang ho. Mohlamonene me khabo ya ba sotho o ipepesitse thethana theka le dutsi matswele se ka dithaba a eme pepeneneng mae shwe ka se shwe se tenne me bale metla ha ka lo siana marena yona kubo ya bohadi fielo a le thathe moseme ya olohi a re tse bona modianyewe a imametse pela mehala di twe ba le sa tsa naheng a se bo tle se boko mmangwana hae a feleheditswe ke nkgono wa tsona ditloholo le ditloholwana a boka ba seng ba fitile le ho leboha tlatla matsholo mohlodi wa mahodimo le mafatshe ho ba le fihlile ka jeno tsatsi le mosotho a ikgopolang ebile a gaba ka boikgantsho ba seo a leng sona. Diteboho. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you. That was absolutely phenomenal. And I think there's just always something about spoken word that just invigorates everyone's souls. And you touched us all. I'm sure I speak for all of us. As Caroline says, she says, beautiful, 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 beautiful. I think that's all our sentiments. I would like to announce that Her Excellency Ms. Charlotte Lobe, President of Aulen, has joined us, and she's really graced us with her presence. I think before we jump into the next speaker, who's Priyanka Ray, I'm going to afford our President and Her Excellency just an opportunity just to say hello and to show us her lovely face. Her Excellency, could you please take the floor? Your Excellency?
Thank you very much, Deputy President of Aulen. Let me greet everyone. I've been on the platform since I think towards the end of the speech by Deputy Minister. So I've been here for the better part of the program. And I had said that because this is a dialogue and roundtable of women, that it is not important that you wait for me to join the platform. Rather, we proceed, because at the end of the day, what we are doing here today has to outlive my tenure in Singapore. And I am happy that I am here. I am here with all of you. Whatever I wanted to say, I'll say at the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and thank you for that. So I'm going to just summarize what Jaro spoke to us about, and I think it's quite pertinent to speak about the influence of arts, especially from a history like ours in South Africa, where we know that during the struggle, it was really, the artists that assisted to communicate the plight of the common person on the ground, and assisted for that mirroring, as she rightfully put, to mirror the circumstances, to mirror the situations, to mirror the plight, to mirror people going through in music, in arts. And that really was a catalyst to a lot of what we call the liberation struggle and the movement. She also said something quite important about intellectual property rights and ensuring that women own that. You can't just look at being the artist and being the creative or the creator. You also need to look at the intellectual property rights, ownership, changing, swapping, whether it is, allowing yourself to be part of the management and sales thereof. She also said, it's quite important to understand that when we're talking about our talent, our talent is our currency. And I find that quite profound. And I think that goes across board in a world where women are still trying to fight or bulldoze their ways into rooms. We need to understand that our contributions are our currency, you know, and that's something that was quite profound. I'm going to stop right there and ask Priyanka Ray to join us. Priyanka, the floor is all yours. We're really looking forward to your contribution. I'm going to say bye for now.
Thank you. Good afternoon and good morning to you all. I would like to thank Your Excellency for making part of this very important discussion. As Deputy Minister said, we are finding our way to each other, and it's an honor to be part of that. So I'll be addressing this topic from three perspectives: as a psychotherapist, as a writer and a storyteller, and as a trained drama instructor. And before I go forward, I would like to ask a question to you all to reflect on who you think you are and what you have become, what you do, how much of that is influenced by your early childhood experiences. The truth is that most of us have been really influenced by our parents, our society, our teachers, and the mainstream media. And much of that would have been written by a male. And a lot of that would have also come from a very patriarchal place, even if we were in Singapore. Our history has been mainly written from a male perspective. Nothing wrong with that, only that it makes it one-sided. And when a society is one-sided but represented by two very different people, there comes a little bit of confusion as to who I am and who you are and how do we lead a very balanced life. And that's where we come into the awareness that we are not being very true to ourselves. So I work with a lot of women and girls, and many of them are really successful at what they do. They might be entrepreneurs, they might be business owners, or they might be leading the field that they are in. And yet I find that most of them are not very sure of who they are and what their story or narrative is, because they have been highly influenced by others. And that's where the problem is. Because what we think we are is probably not really who we are. And then there comes a conflict and a society that's not very balanced. And a lot of it is influenced by a certain kind of narrative. And so we are, most of us, struggling in a very stressful environment. In my therapy room, I have seen this very often, that women as well as men are struggling with a lot of stress, mental health problems, a lot of physical ailments, pains, aches, and sometimes weight gain. Of course, there's a medical side to it, but I would like to tell you all that there is an emotional and psychological side to it. And that comes from the fact that most of us are in conflict because we are not being very true to our authentic self, or we don't have a voice. And this I see mostly in girls, teens, as well as women, regardless of where they are from, how successful they are. There is a struggle between, is this really me, or is this a definition of someone else who has said a successful woman has to be like this, a dutiful daughter has to be like this, a careful person needs to be like this. Is it who really my authentic values or concepts are? And so we come to the point that something has to change in society, whether it's South Africa or it's Singapore. And it comes with an awareness that we need to look not only at our today, but also our past, to separate what is authentic and what has been conditioned. And what better way to use performing arts? Of course, we all know that performance is impactful. It has a wide reach. It's almost equivalent to education in being strong message provider. And so we often try to combine education with performing arts in schools and universities and many other places so that it reaches far and wide. But I'm also here to tell you what performance arts can do in the power of narrative. Performance arts puts a distance between us and our problem, making it easier to tell the truth. As I heard Jaros Jafta saying, beautiful poetry, it was so powerful. If she had to talk about it herself as my thought, it would have come out very differently. But when it comes out in a performance, it's more impactful. And that's why it becomes a great channel and communication means to change the narrative and to put out some perspective which is different. I heard His Excellency Mantaha talking about mindset shift, and this is what performance can do. It can shift not only because it's impactful, but the performer is not feeling very vulnerable while saying it. There is a distance, and that's why we use a lot of drama therapy in our therapy work, because we find that clients, however weak, timid, or small they are, when it comes to a performance, a performing art, they're able to tell a lot more. They're able to talk about trauma. They're able to talk about things that they did not have the voice or the articulation for. And that's why performance art is an important factor to change the narrative of society, whether it's now or the future, so that little girls who are now being influenced, and they will be, most of us have been influenced by our early childhood or adolescent experiences. So it becomes very important to have performance and performing arts incorporated into education and into different parts of our society so that the influences are more balanced. It's not really about being a male or a female. It's mostly about being represented equally in the society, because we have both representation in our real life, and we would like that to be represented in all the areas as well. And because we are so influenced by social media, by writings, by art, by performances, that it becomes really important to see what will the generation of now be influenced with, be influenced by, and their whole idea of success or who I am needs to come from there. And that's where I would like to leave you all, that it is about being authentic self, but many of us are still not sure who we are. So it's probably also a time to take a little pause from our busy schedule and figure out who I am, how much of me is an influence from someone else, how much of it is someone else's dream I'm living or someone else's concept of success I'm adopting. And once we have our true authentic self, to have that freedom to be able to voice about our opinion freely without any gender, being very gender fluid and be represented as an individual, not as much as a male or a female. That's all I need to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that. That was quite profound and so appropriate in a time where, you know, we are more sensitive towards issues of mental health, and we are giving more credence to it because we see the gravity of you know, people taking their lives, people's lives literally spiraling out of control because, like you said, they're not being true to themselves, they're not being their authentic selves. But they say 50% of getting to a solution or to the answer is properly diagnosing the problem. And if the problem is that we're not paying attention to sort of our influences from a childhood perspective, also understanding the elements that influence those very same things. And like you said, you know, whether it's pressures subconsciously or consciously from our parents, our society, by not unpacking those things and by not understanding, and like you said, by not pausing and thinking about ourselves and asking ourselves these questions, who you think you are, what is your story and what is your narrative? Is it your authentic, true story narrative? And how much of it was influenced by your childhood? I think if we take a step, all of us, to do that, we'd all be better for it. And they say in order for us to change the world, it just takes each one of us to do our part. So that was exceptional. Thank you so much for that, Priyanka. And I think when it comes to the patriarchal influences, like you said, it's not necessarily negative or positive, but it is important to acknowledge what they are and which part of your lives they influence, especially as, you know, people who are in the feminist movement, who are trying to contribute to equity, equality, peace, and security for all people, but most especially women, because they have been at the center of, you know, the prejudicial side of the world that we happen to live in. There was also something that was quite similar to yourself and what Jaro said, where she said performance in the performing arts is a pathway of expression. And if you don't have an adequate way to express yourself, then your thoughts are not outwardly put there. And I can only imagine the psychological burden that can have on an individual. But thank you so much for that. I'm quite certain that so far everybody has been blown away by this panel. And we've got our last speaker, who is Ms. Machild Brenholk, and I hope I'm saying that correctly. Please do pardon me for mispronouncing it if I did. Ms. Brenholk, please take the floor.
Thank you so much, and thank you to everyone for this amazing opportunity. I'm absolutely inspired by all of you, and there are so many great takeaways and practical solutions that we can put in place. So for me, I am living and breathing inclusion overall, and how we can actually break down the gender biases, cultural biases. And there are so many different vehicles that we can use. And although awareness is a key topic that is ever evolving, what we're doing here today is we're creating a platform to really drive impactful change. And I hope to continue to be part of this. Now, inclusion empowers, and the reason why I'm very passionate about this is inclusion empowers all, and it excludes none. And taking action in economic empowerment means we balance the capacity of women and men to participate in ways that recognize the value of their contribution. We respect their dignity, and it makes it possible to negotiate a fairer distribution of benefits of growth. And we're not only celebrating Women's Month, but countries coming together and driving change and setting programs in place for a path towards gender equality, eradication of poverty, and inclusive of economic growth. Changing the gender narrative is absolutely important, and there are so many ways how we can do that through performing arts and in culture. And rebalancing the scales in gender equality in culture is key. These are neither static topics. These are ever evolving. And culture has the unique power to tell untold stories. And despite notable progress that we can see in different areas, women are still underrepresented by and large in almost all cultural fields. A recent UNESCO report states that only 1 in 3 of the awards for main film categories of 60 major film festivals worldwide were given to female artists and producers in 2019, whilst just 8% of orchestra conductor performances in 2019 were by women. I'd like to highlight Netflix actually as a prime example of how they take action and we're talking about influences through media and social media and films and so forth. Now, Netflix is a prime example, leading and driving inclusion through storytelling and increasing representation across the board. Now, from a New York Times report in 2021, state 52% of Netflix films and series in 2018 and 2019 had girls or women in starring roles. And 35.7% of all Netflix leads during that span came from underrepresented groups, compared with 28% in the top 100 grossing theatrical films. One area that I'd like to highlight here is on a practical element as well, is there from a technological perspective, arts have become more digitalized as well, and there are more ways how we can even drive financial inclusion through that, which is a topic that's very, very close to my heart. I'm not sure if you're familiar with NFTs, but both South Africa as well as Singapore being financial hubs creates a great way for us to coming together. I'm South African, been living in Singapore for 5 years, and being in the technological industry, and I can see great change in driving towards that, where the NFT platforms, for those not familiar with this, it's a non-fungible token, which means it's a digital asset that links ownership to unique physical digital assets. And that can be in art, it can be in music, it can be in videos, it can be in property, etc. And this also creates a platform in a way for artists to have their ownership of their intellectual property, but also drive more financial inclusion. And this way, we can create more mentorship opportunities, sponsorship opportunities. Caroline actually mentioned that earlier, by partnering through with technical firms, creating an ecosystem and a network that not only creates these sponsorship and mentoring opportunities, but actual practical learning opportunities for those already in their careers, like intermediary to advanced that I've seen. As a businesswoman and a COO of a global digital banking firm, I've created the opportunities internally to specifically mentor the women in my group. However, you can still see that there's a lot of internship programs that's always on offer. But as women grow in their careers and as they go on, probably by mid-management level, they start to fall off due to gender discrimination, harassment in the workplace. And this is by no means different in the arts as well. And this is an area that we need to capture, and we can, I've read a report as well that only 2% of venture capitalist funds in the last 3 years has gone to female-led firms. Another area which we can create a firm foundation for in the arts and culture. It's lots of these artists have an opportunity to create their businesses and grow in their entrepreneurship. And for us coming together in creating that ecosystem, we can increase the funding for female-led startups. We can increase the access to funds and growth in skill tech, but also financial literacy and growth in the countries for growing these entrepreneurs. I'd like to close with a quote that I'm quite passionate about. It says, "Inclusion is intentional. It is about identifying and removing barriers so that everyone can participate to the best of their ability." And that is why I love that, because inclusion has no barriers to it whatsoever. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that, Machtel. I'm not sure if I'm saying it correctly, am I? Yes?
It's Machtel Brenholz, but no problem.
Okay, I'll practice that. But thank you so much for that, and that was quite insightful. And those parallels between the technology and ICT ecosystem and the arts, where you're saying, pretty much across the industries, across sectors, across bound, we're literally experiencing the same things as women, where we find brilliant people, brilliant talent who happen to just fall off, and we lose women and girls because of issues of patriarchy, sexual harassment, issues of the boys' club, gatekeeping, things that really, if you think about it, in 2022 we should not be talking about. We should be having different conversations, and the narrative should have changed by now. But like you said, it really takes, like your quote said, inclusion is intentional. It doesn't happen haphazardly. You need to have a plan, you need to have a framework, you need to get buy-in from people, and I think you also need to have people with a teachable spirit who have to look at the past and look at where they want to go, and ask themselves if patriarchy has worked for them. And I don't think anybody, honestly speaking, would have a positive answer or an affirmative answer to that. You said inclusion empowers all, and it doesn't exclude, which I think is excellent. We have these conversations a lot of the times, and there are tensions that kind of build up in rooms, especially for people who have not necessarily developed their skill set or their knowledge around the women's movement or the feminist movement. When people come up with terms like feminazi and, come up with really ugly terms that don't really embody what feminism is about. It's It's about inclusion, it's about transformation, and it's about not leaving anyone behind. And I think you encapsulated that quite well. And with the intention that you did speak about, you know, speaking about how Netflix has ensured that 52% of its leads in the shows that they have is a woman. You know, no one even looks at those kind of things, but it's really for a network like ours to say, okay, if Netflix is doing that, how do we ensure that we support them even further to ensure that there's more growth and that there's revenue that's generated there that is filtered to the very same woman that we are, you know, vying for ourselves, our daughters, our mothers, our cousins, our sisters. And you know, you spoke about NFTs and just looking at how this is a new frontier where women can actually get in, and from a technology and arts perspective, because those two are really, it's a creative space. You can't have NFTs without art, and you can't have art without you can't have the digital side without the art. So those two speak hand in hand. And looking at the financial aspect there, the mentorship, looking at sponsorships, looking at growing the ecosystem and getting people, women especially, to practically go into organizations and you know, be part of this wave, this movement, and see how they can benefit going forward. I genuinely thank you so much for your contributions. I think our panel was exceptional, and we, you know, when it comes to that infusion of saying, let us show up, let's be intentional, let us be our authentic selves. All of those things really speak hand in hand. But I'm going to also just congratulate and just say you're exceptionally brave, and we salute you to Jaros once more. You know, for the loss that you've endured, and to grace us with your presence and to share so passionately your art and your opinions, your thoughts, your intellectual property. Really do appreciate that. I'm going to go into a question and answer session. I just want to check if I've got access to the chat. I'd also just like us to use as participants, if you could raise your hands, I will acknowledge you. And then what we will do is we will allow each person, if you can also just send a message on the chat, I think that would be great. But we will, pardon? Apologies. Okay. We are going to ask Sifokwane Shuping to take the floor. Sifokwane, can you hear me? Are you able to unmute yourself? Let's see if I can. I think, Sifokwane, if it's possible for you to maybe just write the question on the chat, that will enable us to read it out and to allow whoever you're directing the message to answer your question. And I think there are really a lot of things that we can speak about. We are quite fortunate that each speaker was quite articulate and really went, in the short space of time, really went in and explained the ideas that they had. But I'm going to just give a few seconds to the viewers and anybody that has any question, and even panelists. I mean, if you have questions, for I do apologize. If you have questions for the members, I am very happy to read them out for you. If you are a panelist, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question. Apologies that we had a technical difficulty. Well, I was a difficulty. It wasn't the technology, it was me. I just want to check if we do have any questions. Okay. So I see here, this is from Mampurana Karen Homo, and she says, age is a biggest barrier to inclusion. Women are either too young or too old. What measures are you proposing practically to mitigate this barrier in education opportunities? I am going to indulge us with a few answers, but I will also allow for our panelists to take on some questions. Okay, so we've got that question. So I'm going to just maybe work with my panel, maybe just give maybe yourself, Ms. Brinkholt, your opinion on that particular question, and then we will then give someone from another panel the opportunity just to answer that. Thank you, the floor is yours.
Absolutely. So age is the biggest barrier to inclusion, either too young or too old. It's I've faced the same thing, yes, and similar ladies that I have in a cohort that I had for diversity inclusion across Asia Pacific. It was quite a common thing as well, that right now it is something that we still work on. I think some companies are trying to put certain programs in place on skill sets and merits based on gender equality, but that is still an issue that needs to be addressed. Right now, this is why I'm actually suggesting having a platform and networks and corporate programs in place that actually drives these changes, not just by being aware or make people aware. I've been part of programs where we rolled out and trained about gender biases and gender bias in leadership. And you quite often find that just through creating awareness, people lose interest. You have some people feeling that they're not really part of that because we are influenced by our own biases, feeling that, or sometimes thinking that we are not part of the problem. It is something that we can only start by showing how that actually can drive change. It's a hard question to answer, because it's definitely, for me, in my view, I do not limit anybody by age.
Hello, Your Excellency.
How are you?
I'm good.
All set.
All set. एक और, अब तो अफ्रीका ही नहीं मुझे छोड़ रहा है। ये आज एक और हो रही है यहाँ औरतों के ऊपर, वुमेन्स जेंडर इक्वालिटी साउथ अफ्रीका कर रहा है। बोलने में होती है, जेंडर इक्वालिटी होती कहीं नहीं है।
Ask her to mute. Ask her to mute.
हाँ जी, तो सब I'll explain to you. 3:30 we will start. So I will just give a little introduction to the whole thing. After that, the dean will speak. The Rwandan guy will speak. उसके बाद there's a speech by this Angolan chairman. That's an introductory thing. Okay, then there is first panel. उस first panel का जो moderator है वो है रणवीर.
Are you not able to
speaker हो आप और
I don't think
Jay
she's
Shankar,
able to hear us now.
ESG
She's in the
और
world
South
of her
African
own.
ambassador. ठीक है? So they are talking about using Africa as supply chain resource, वो सब. हाँ, वो मैंने आपको लिख के भेज दिया है. आपको 10 मिनट देगा ये, आपको कहानी अपनी बतानी है, कहाँ से शुरू किए, क्या किए, आपको वो बताना आता है.
From the embassy,
तो वो है कि कैसे opportunities है, छोटे की भी, बड़े भी, whatever you want to say. अफ्रीका वाली अपना बोलेगी कि how to sow.
Okay, thank you for that. Apologies. So what we're going to do is just due to that slight delay there, could we please go, and I'm going to open up the floor to Her Excellency, Ms. Charlotte Love. Thank you, Your Excellency. Please take the floor. We're all ears. Your Excellency, you're muted. Could you please unmute yourself? Thank you.
I was saying that I thought I was going to speak at the end as I close, not unless you are asking me to do that right now.
I do apologize for that. I think the slide no, we're done with our question and answer session. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to hand over to our MC. She's going to join us. Thank you so much for the contributions from all the panelists. I really do appreciate that. It was quite insightful, and I think we've all learned a lot, and we're definitely looking forward to another round of this. And I hope we're not going to wait for a second round, an annual for next year. I hope we have small sessions that really allow us to grow on this panel. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you everyone for a very insightful roundtable. And we have heard that inclusion is intentional, and we've been saying that inclusion is intentional or will not move the needle. So I'm now going to call Masichaba Tekano, a gender activist, the person who put us together as we were, as a country, joining the Generation Equality Forum from Mexico to Paris. She made sure that South Africa show up in our diversity. So Masichaba, we have been listening, my sister.
Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption. I just wanted to let everyone know during the duration of the Zoom meeting, I have extended the time as I know we ran over, but the meeting will end at 12:30, and I unfortunately am not able to extend it again. So just wanted to put out that warning to you.
All right. No, we are closing. We are closing. Masichaba, can you please now give us a summary, and then we'll go to Her Excellency.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Let me also stand on the existing protocol and recognize all our distinguished keynote speakers, all our panelists, and all our participants. In the interest of time, I will just offer a high-level summary of key actions that came out of the discussions we've had earlier, and noting that we will capture all the actions that I might not highlight given the time limit that we have, and I would like to actually leave more time for Her Excellency Ms. Charlotte Lobe to address us. And starting with you, Program Director, whereby you highlighted, and just to amplify your recognition and acknowledgement of Her Excellency Ms. Charlotte Lobe for this initiative, starting a partnership between women in the two countries to make sure that we go beyond dialogues, but come up with practical solutions that will really start a revolution where we will accelerate gender equality. And just to highlight DM Pinky Kakana, what she said, which really is important for this dialogue, is to make sure that we don't reinvent the wheel, we actually leverage the existing frameworks, because in that way we are able to move forward quickly and make sure that we accelerate change. But also making sure that we learn from the women who marched in 1956, tackling challenges facing women and honoring their spirit through the dialogue, but also the actions that will take us forward, turning the tide for our women through this bilateral. Quickly coming to His Excellency Zainal Mantaha, where he actually highlighted the fact that we have so much in common, and making sure that we learn from one another, best practice that we have seen, lessons learned in tackling issues to make sure that we accelerate change. And building on the existing relationship and the foundation laid by the two countries. And he reminded us that next year in 2023, there will be a celebration of the diplomatic relationship between the two countries, and thanking him for highlighting the 5 key actions that the country has taken to make sure that the principles of equality as enshrined in the Constitution are realized by women in the country, and those will be captured in the summary that will be circulated. And also highlighting the significance of 9th of August for both countries, where for us in South Africa, we celebrate Women's Day, but for Singapore, it's Singapore's National Day, whereby they gained independence as a country. Summarizing the first panel, led by our colleague Zandi Bengu, highlighting the commitment that South Africa has made in driving women's economic empowerment through co-leading Economic Justice and Right Action Coalition through Generation Equality Forum last year, supported by our president, really laid the foundation and commitment that South Africa continue to make in empowering women in our country, but also globally. And just to also highlight what Caroline Berube said, having a pool of mentors, of coaches and sponsors is one practical way of us taking this forward beyond the dialogue, and making sure that what Nomita also suggested, saying that we need to come out of the computer screen and meet in person to bring reality to these actions that have been suggested. But also highlighting what she said in her speech, saying we cannot demand equality as women, but we have to earn it, we have to work for it. We are not victims, and we need to handhold and make sure that we bring our men and male and boys to the table as we come up with solutions that are practical. And the exchange mission that she suggested is quite important as we go forward. But also what was highlighted was the fact that our financial banking systems needs to be enabling for our women. They come up with solutions, but those solutions are not accessible. How do we engage our banking system to make sure that their financial products are gender responsive and are accessible to all women, to make sure that they are empowered as intended? And Morunga reminded us that having policy and not implementing the policies is not good enough. We need to go beyond intentions, making sure that young people are not restricted, but they are mentored and they have sponsorships and they are actually enabled to also be economically empowered. And also, what was key in what has been discussed is the fact that visionary leadership is quite critical in accelerating gender equality, and implementing of policies is quite critical, and we need to be conscious about it and make sure that women use our superpower to create change that we want to see in the world. And personal commitment and involvement in creating change is quite important. We can all individually make a difference, and we were reminded that by our speaker, Weng Leng Tay. And Jaros, thank you so much for inspiring us with that poem, also emphasizing the fact that we all can make a difference and contribute towards empowering women and girls in our society with the work that you shared with us that you are doing in the community. And also, with regards to challenges faced by artists, it is important to recognize how artists have contributed in the past and continue to contribute through their skills in creating change in the world. But also, what we also heard is the importance of looking at our family system, paying attention to the elements that shape the society, making sure that we show up and become authentic in what we do, and making sure that issues of mental health are also, we pay attention to that. And lastly, what was also emphasized You know, Martold, I've always been the person with the most difficult name in the room, and I'm glad that you and I are in the same boat. My name being Masichaba, people struggle to do that, so you and I need to connect and share notes. But what you have said really touched my heart, because I spent my days engaging corporates on how you become consciously inclusive in your thinking. To be inclusive, you need to be conscious about it, and you have reminded us that awareness in dealing with issues of biases doesn't come naturally to everyone. We need to make sure that we create an ecosystem and a network of people that preach this, you know, the fact that we can eradicate these discriminatory practices by being consciously inclusive and being intentional about it, so that we don't leave anyone behind. With that, Program Director, I will hand over back to you, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ms. Chava, for that comprehensive summary of our roundtable today. Now, before saying anything and spoiling it, let me give Her Excellency, the President of Aulin, Meshalot Lobe. Today, I think I'm also learning and stealing from Singapore. Her Excellency High Commissioner Lobe, to do the closing remarks for us. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Program Director, the Secretary General of the African Women Leaders Network, South Africa. I don't know if I am teary or I am happy about the session of today. Let me just start by saying that we've had a very difficult day. Our day started at 3. Ambassador Manda will understand that sometimes we are called upon to do some airport duties that were not really part of your plans. And so our day started at 3. And it continued. We had about 3 delegations that were coming, others on transit and others who were staying in Singapore. So it has been that kind of a day. And in addition to that, we hosted the ambassador of Zimbabwe to both Singapore and Indonesia earlier, and because she's a woman, also we gave her a bit of space to express the kind of collaborations we want to have with us. Let me thank Deputy Minister Pinky Sharon Kekane for staying with us until this moment.
Yes.
This shows an extraordinary commitment on her part on the issues of women and their development. Thank my counterpart in South Africa, Excellency Zainel Mantaha, for making it possible for us to have this wonderful collaboration between the women of our 2 countries. Let me just spend about a minute or so talking about my counterpart in South Africa. When I was nominated, this is something that people usually don't do, and usually we send a note verbal to the countries where you are nominated to, and I was the only one who actually received an invitation to come and sit down with my counterpart and discuss how we would want to shape our agenda as the 2 high commissioners in these 2 beautiful countries. So I am fortunate in that way. Part of our discussion that Thursday, Ambassador Zainel, was that in his view, as a very as a person who's been in this work for years, is that anything that you're unable to do in the first 100 days, you'll not be able to achieve in the last 100 days. So wow. I quietly kept this secret to myself. And when I arrived in Singapore, I remembered that if I'm unable to plant a seed during my 100 days, that seed won't be able to germinate and bear fruit during my last 100 days. So he said to me, the second thing, you need to have at least 3 things you want to do. And that same day, he asked me, what do you want to do? So I said to him, you know, I want to focus on issues of women's empowerment, youth empowerment, but also issues of economic diplomacy. But in addition to that, strengthening our relations as South Africa and Singapore. He said, very good. You know, our president is actually a woman. She'll be very happy to hear what you're saying. I'm sure that he's surprised that I kept the nose because I was not having a pen. It was a lunch discussion, but I listened quite well. All I'm saying to South African women is that you have a friend in High Commissioner Mantaha. He is a person who makes things to happen. He is a person who has his voice in the highest echelons of the government of Singapore. So if I want anything at all, I know that I call South Africa and say, my brother, I'm struggling with this and that, can you help me? And he will, you know, he sent me some very funny emojis where he says something like, and I know that it will be done. So that is the kind of a person he is, and I wish to ask Arlene and all the structures that are in South Africa to utilize him. I must also say that he has a bit of budget, so please go to him, organize programs with him. So thank you very much, Ambassador, for your guidance, for the collaboration that we've had, for the brotherhood, because this is something that we also need as human beings. I need to know that there's someone I can call on, and that even what I regard to be a very huge problem can be solved. I wish to thank my partners, Nomita from Sun Media. Actually, the idea of hosting this roundtable was an idea that I discussed first with Nomita because she is involved in conferencing and organizing international conferences on women. And she said, no, man, High Commissioner, we don't have time. This thing won't succeed. And I said, you know what, let us start small. Even if you can have only 20 people on the platform, but let us plant a seed, because out of 20, it means we have captured 20 different networks. So for me, it was not how many people would come, but it's about what the number that is here today means for the kind of work that we want to do moving forward. So I wish to thank Nomita for her support, for supporting the idea with all her anxieties for us to succeed. I believe that she's one of the most happiest person today. Tomorrow, she is hosting a Made in Africa conference where we are looking at opportunities. You've heard she addressed you about it without her knowing earlier on when she was speaking to our dean of the Africa group from Rwanda. So you already know what is going to happen tomorrow. And I wish her all the best for the conference of tomorrow. I believe it is going to be majestic. Thank Embassy Direct for the collaboration. We have started working with them about 2 weeks or so ago. And those who work with me know that I always try my best in using human capital to achieve greatness. And I believe that what started about 2 weeks ago has developed into a very beautiful relationship that I am proud of, that I believe can be taken to the next level. Embassy Direct is a magazine, it's a magazine for ambassadors. So I challenged Ambassador Rodrigo to also distribute it outside of ambassadors, because I believe there's useful information that people can read from the magazine. Something nice about everything else is that he is a South African for the following reason. He was posted in South Africa for 2 terms, so he spent 8 years, his first 4 years, and went back and then was called again to represent Panama in South Africa. And later on, he was the South Africa's honorary consular in Panama. And after that, he decided that he was gonna seek permanent residence in South Africa. So he's now a South African citizen. I also ask that you utilize him. He is quite resourceful in terms of his work in diplomacy, but also he's quite useful in terms of the contacts that he has in Latin America, even here in Asia. So please, I invite you to work with him. Thank the Aulin Collective, the Deputy President. You see, the reason that I shine is that my Deputy President is not only an advocate, but she's also quite beautiful, but also brainy. I'm sure she has, she sold Aulin to everyone who is in this platform. You are now interested to know the kind of work that we do. Thank the SG, who has been the program director, and for steering the ship quite well, even with some challenges at the beginning with our connectivity. But I believe that you have steered the ship well. To thank also the moderators, Ms. Zandi Bengu, for always supporting my work wherever I am. I am grateful to have a younger sister that I can call upon and say, we don't have money to pay people to moderate, please come on board and assist. And she was willing to assist. To thank Masi Chaba for her wonderful summary of our discussions of today. I believe we can build on what she has summarized, and we can use it. Myself and Ambassador Zainel can use it also as part of our report to our two governments to say the women of South Africa and Singapore met, and these are the issues that they considered. I wish to particularly acknowledge the presence of Rose Jafta in this discussion, as was mentioned that she had she lost her mother yesterday. I had called and wanted to hear if she should be able to come. In fact, I was offering that maybe she may want to consider not to come, but she said she believes in the collaboration, and she believes that from here we can build on, and she wanted to add her voice in support of the work that we are doing. So I thank her for her courage, but also for her commitment to this cause. I wish to acknowledge in the list of participants, acknowledge the presence of our two commissioners of the Commission on Gender Equality South Africa, Commissioner Mazibuko, as well as Commissioner Mutupi. Unfortunately, we could not give them a platform to say a few words, but this is a beginning of a wonderful program. I believe that there's a lot that the Gender Commission can learn from Singapore, and I invite you to visit Singapore. I believe that you can have collaborations with my counterpart in South Africa, and please feel free to go to his office, talk to him, and see how he can assist in the work that you are doing. I have also seen that in the participants, we have women from World Women Leading Change. We have their presidents. They have several presidents who are on the platform earlier on. I'm not sure if they are still on the platform. I have seen one from Zimbabwe. I have seen the president from South Africa. I've seen their national board member in the session, and I've also seen a president of Mozambique. She's the only one that I can see she's still on the platform. President Julia Wachave, who is from Cabo Delgado in Namibia. Now, she challenged me in a session we had with them on Saturday, because I also had another session with the Women Leading Change herself, and the South African president had challenged me that even though we are calling it a platform for South African and Singapore women, they feel that it should change shape and it should become a SADC ASEAN women's round table. And their view is that President Julia Wachave, she says, I am in Mozambique, but I believe in the work that you want to do. And she also says that, you see, Singapore has one a high commissioner who is responsible to a number of African countries. Can't we build on that? Can't we support the work that he's doing from all these other countries and have a product that all of us can be proud of? I could not have agreed more. I think that as we move forward, we may want to consider hosting something that takes a regional dimension. Earlier on, I had said that I met with the ambassador of Zimbabwe to both Singapore and Indonesia, and she too challenged me that, my sister, can we have a collaboration that will also include women from Zimbabwe, but also try to also work with women in Indonesia. So that is one thing that I bring on the table for us to consider, Ambassador Zainel, as we move forward. I acknowledge in the participants list the Gertrude Shope Women Mediators Network led by Mehomu, and I saw a Nonto also on the group from the Gertrude Shope. I saw Mercedes Omfanta also from Gertrude Shope on the list of participants. I thank all of you, even those whose names I did not call. I called under general as part of the African Women Leaders Network. I thank you profusely, because the reason why myself and Ambassador Manta are placed where we are placed by our governments. From my side, you can imagine that out of almost 70 million South Africans, President Ramaphosa chose that he will place me in Singapore. And out of almost 7 million Singaporeans, Prime Minister Lee felt that Ambassador Manda is the right person to be in South Africa. And both our president expects the following from us. One, to strengthen our bilateral relations, particularly as we move to the 30th anniversary of our diplomatic relations. And we think that this kind of an arrangement can be something beautiful, that as we celebrate the 30th anniversary of our diplomatic relations, we can announce a concrete collaboration between our women that is also a driving force behind our diplomatic relations. The second thing they expect from us is to promote trade between our two countries. I moved into Singapore supermarkets, for example. I look around, I become so pleased to see bio oil made by a woman in the Western Cape on the shelves. I become so proud to see our wines made by particularly women on the shelves in Singapore. But myself and Ambassador Manta have this hunger that we can do more. We can trade more on agro-processing as an example. Imagine the South African women, you are from a country that is endowed with arable land, mineral resources, you name them. Singapore is endowed with technology. They are endowed with one of the best performing economies in the world. Now, what I'm trying to say is that if we put all of you together in one basket, women from Singapore can come to South Africa with capital because they have capital, and you can come with your land and you can decide you are going to open a farm in South Africa that will provide Singapore with beef or with chicken or things that has to do with agro-processing, even fruit. The idea is that we acknowledge our strengths as women of South Africa, as women of Singapore, and look at how best we can use our strengths to build our economies further. There is no doubt that South Africa is one of those countries who hold the key for future economies, because the future economies are dependent on renewables, and the kind of mineral resources that you have, they are at a point where you can position yourself better to become the economy of the future. But you cannot do that alone. You need your partners in Singapore who have the technical know-how, who can transfer skills to you, but also who can assist you even with startups. Part of the people who are on the panel, Caroline, is having a foundation. Her foundation is about funding young people between the ages of 16 and 24 who are starting their own businesses. One of the things that is beautiful about this is that she says to the High Commission, I am here, utilize me, work with me, let us make this thing possible. Now, the reason we have this platform.
Sorry,
Yes.
they're going to cut out 2 minutes.
Yes, the reason we have this platform is exactly for us to leverage on all of these things that I have spoken about. Like I said, this is the beginning, and we believe there's beautiful things that we are going to do moving forward. My dream is to host a business delegation of women of Singapore to South Africa to not only invest, but to have a first-hand feel about the South African economy and its people and what we're able to do. The very last thing, in South Africa, there is a squatter camp, or what do they call it?
Informal settlement.
Informal settlement. That is called Singapore in Limpopo. Now, my dream is to take women of Singapore to that informal settlement, and I want to challenge women of Singapore, Ambassador Zainel, to turn it into a real Singapore in South Africa in terms of skills, etc. Thank you very much, Program Director.
Malibongwe.
Thank you.